Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Brent Aiken, David Pruitt, and Russell Martin. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Brent Aiken. Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you and invite you over to our website, studentministryconversations.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes, show notes, and blog articles. Our goal is that you are inspired, encouraged, and the things that you hear on this podcast can equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you're serving in. Today, we are sitting down with Ryan Eastman, and Ryan is also one of the fellow Abilenians, but Ryan has a different role when it comes to who I normally interview from Abilene. And Ryan is not officially in the youth ministry field anymore. He was a youth pastor, but now he focuses a little more time and effort on parachurch ministries, specifically FCA. So outside of that, Ryan, why don't you tell us about you? What you do exactly in FCA, tell us about your family, whatever else you want to throw in, and then we'll go from there.
Sweet. Yeah. My name is Ryan Eastman. Grew up a West Texas kid in San Angelo, Texas. Played golf all my life, played in college, and met my wife actually in youth ministry, doing a Disciple Now weekend. And we've been married for 10 years. We have a 2.5-year-old and one on the way in October. And so we've been living in Abilene now for about 4 years. Spent about 20 years in student ministry. Was called to ministry at 16. Ran from that for an entire year. I don't know if there's anybody that's similar out there, but ran from that calling for an entire year because I thought it meant that I had to give up golf. I had to give up all of these things to pursue ministry right then and there. And it was actually through a conversation with another student that was battling the same calling that I kind of shared some words of wisdom with him that I should have been telling myself all along. And so at 16, surrendered my life to the ministry and was licensed and ordained, and spent a lot of chunk of time as a worship and youth pastor up in North Texas. So transitioned to a missions organization back in 2019 that was housed here in Abilene. Tried to help get it off the ground, and via COVID, got a little restless, and the director of FCA in this area approached me about a male college position within the 3 colleges here in Abilene. And so I serve Fellowship of Christian Athletes as a college chaplain and character coach at these 3 universities here in Abilene, Texas.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so Ryan has been around for a little bit. Like I said, he's been in Abilene for a little while. We probably met somewhere in the realm of 2019, I would say. It probably wasn't too far after that. But the first time we met, he invited me to lunch because he was talking about this mission organization that he was a part of, and he just kind of wanted to. He was like, "I've heard you're in town. I want to get to know you," as he did with most youth pastors in town. And from then on, man, we've known each other and had quite a few cups of coffee and lunches over the years. So,
right.
But man, grateful for you to be on the show today. Thank you for your time. And I think it's an important conversation too, because we've done a episode like this, not necessarily parachurch ministries by themselves, but we've talked about how to get involved in schools. And one of the large ways that you can get involved in schools, of course, is parachurch ministries, whether it be First Priority or FCA or any of the other ones that are out there. But there's the other aspect of it, and there's some youth pastors that might not even know because they're really not plugged in or connected to any of them in their area. Or they might not have an FCA because as massive as FCA is, they aren't on every campus. And so you might be in a town listening to this and you don't know what FCA is because you've never had an FCA in your town. So let's start with just what is FCA? What is y'all's purpose? What is y'all's mission? And what are y'all trying to accomplish from both a junior high and high school level, but also on the collegiate level as well? What is the purpose and what is the mission of FCA?
Absolutely. Well, our mission is to lead every coach and athlete in a growing relationship with Christ and His church. And so in the junior high and high school level, that looks what we call huddle, generally meeting on campus if possible. Obviously, across the states, we see some some schools that allow it on their campus, and then other times they're having to meet off campus. But it's an opportunity just for like-minded students, whether they be athletes. I also joke that it's Fellowship of Christian Anybody's, and so we don't necessarily exclude to just athletes, but at the same time, we usually use sport analogies or different things to help drive home some themes and some points throughout Scripture. And so, yeah, at the junior high and high school level, it generally is there's a representative that serves that area, and they could serve anywhere between 10 to, I think there's one rep in Texas that serves like 70 different schools. And so obviously you can see that we're spread thin in that regard, but what we look for is a huddle coach, which is generally a coach that's on staff at a junior high or a high school that will kind of take the lead and just be more or less a liaison in the school. We love to see it be student-led, but just somebody in the school that will say, yeah, I'll step up and I'll lead it either before school or at lunch or a break period sometimes, even depending on school schedules. And so they'll usually be the ones that actually run the FCA from a week-to-week standpoint or a biweekly standpoint. We do have some that meet once a month. But it's usually somebody that's already on campus that's kind of a person of peace, if you will, that will lead. And then the rep's responsibility is really just making sure they have the resources and serving them and encouraging them as they lead on a week-to-week basis. And so we rely a lot, at times with youth pastors. I know when I was a youth pastor, a big form of my ministry was in FCA. It was just another opportunity to be on campus with students. And so I became a character coach within FCA, kind of an extension of the ministry, if you will, which gave me a chance to build relationships with other kids outside of just my local church. And so it was a great opportunity. And so that's kind of the junior high, high school model as far as how we serve them. And then, of course, you've got different events that we do, like Fields of Faith is a big outreach opportunity that we have. We do here in the local area, we do something similar to a D Now. We call it Weekend of Champions. And so girls will go on one weekend. They'll go to like a retreat center and spend Friday through Sunday or Saturday and Sunday together. We have a guys' weekend that usually follows up either the next week or 2 weeks after. And so that's a couple of different events that we do, during the school year. And then we also have our summer camps during the summer that we really hit the junior high and high school ministry pretty hard. The college realm of FCA, a lot of people don't realize that FCA extends into college. And to be honest, college FCA for me was a huge impact and a huge opportunity for community on my college campus. I grew up with a lot of friends, but didn't really run in any tight circles with fellow guys. And it wasn't until college and college FCA presented an opportunity to find some guys to be able to run and do life with. And so college FCA is really where I found a community. The cool thing about college ministry, it's very similar in that we have a huddle, but it's more like a college service. We meet on Monday nights here in Abilene. One of the cool things is we have 3 universities. And so instead of having 3 separate huddles like we used to do after COVID, we decided, hey, it might be cool to bring those 3 colleges together, give them an opportunity to find community with maybe the same sport athletes, but from different universities and different levels as well. And we've seen a lot of cool community being built from campus to campus. All 3 campuses hanging out with one another and building and bridging that gap there. And so that's been pretty encouraging. But we usually do a couple songs of worship, and then we challenge them in the Word, and then put them in small group discussions just to really hash out. And so it's kind of a full spectrum from junior high to college. We're even diving into youth sports now. We're trying, we're as our president once said, he said, we're in a race for the heart of a student. And it's beginning earlier and earlier. And so we're even seeing some impact in youth sports, little kids sports leagues. We have a big 7-on-7 football league here in Abilene that we really pursue the heart of younger children as well.
Yeah, no, and it's obviously important. And the thing is if I mean I think there's a lot of people that would attest to the fact that if they are no longer coming to the church has to come to them. And whether that be in a good light or a bad light, sometimes that's picking up kids in a church van and like driving them to church. Sometimes that's just literally taking the ministry to the ball field. And that is something that FCA has done well with. And y'all are continuing to grow in as y'all are even potentially looking into youth baseball and other things like that, and a lot of cool opportunities with that. I wanted to go back to two things, especially with FCA, because, like I said, a lot of people might have an FCA and then they just might not know. But then a lot of people might not have it. First off, you said junior high and high school huddles. They are typically started or ran by someone that is within the school themselves. And so you would say that that's, I mean, people might not know this, but most of the time that doesn't necessarily have to be a coach.
No, it doesn't.
So
No, if there's a teacher on staff, or even a youth pastor that would like to see it on that campus, there's opportunities there. It doesn't have to always be a coach.
yeah. And so I think that's important to note just for the sake of like a lot of times and like you said earlier, the whole fellowship of Christian athletes and the fellowship of Christian anybody's, realistically, what started is like we are going to go after the athletes. I think FCA kind of made the realization, and this was back before I was even or when I was in high school and earlier, with the mindset of it was like, well, why are we stopping there? Like, why don't we just try to reach everybody? And so even though the name's I guess stuck and they're trying to continue to go after athletes with sports related things, their primary goal is just to equip students with the gospel, and that's pretty evident in their approach. The second thing I wanted to mention is with FCA, there are, you said huddles and everything else. I know that I have definitely heard this and seen this in different circles where there is this, I guess, for lack of a better word, misinformation going around with groups like FCA and Young Life and everywhere else, where these parachurch ministries are trying to come and steal our students, kind of thing like that. And so, what is your approach to that? Because I know in my personal experience, I know that that's a lie. I know that that's false. But what is the goal of like, how do y'all work with other churches?
Absolutely. Church partnerships are huge for us with FCA. Obviously, we're an extension of the church, and that's really my heart behind it too. Coming out of church ministry, one of the biggest things that we want to do is usher kids into the church. We may introduce them to the gospel or to Christ via sports, maybe on the sports field. But then we're looking with church partnerships and the partnerships that we've built in and around the communities. We want to be able to push those students back into the local church. We want them to get connected. And so Fields of Faith, one of the biggest things we do when we have a lot of people is on our decision card, we actually ask for the church. And then our different representatives for those local areas are reaching out to those youth pastors, reaching out to those children's ministers, different things like that to try to get those students involved in their local ministry. In college especially, one of the biggest things that we do as our college ministry, we say FCA is not the church. It's a great place to find community, but FCA is kind of a time and season in your life. You may go on to be a volunteer, you may go on to be a donor, a board member, a staff member, whatever, but after college, there's not a weekly FCA meeting that you go to. So we want them to understand that their spiritual formation, their growth, their maturity comes via the local church. And so that's something that's kind of cool about my piece. And a big thing that's on my heart is to build and establish relationships, not only with college ministers in this town, but also youth pastors, that we can come alongside each other and help kind of usher that teamwork mindset of, hey, we're going to try to do everything that we can to point them back to you. And one of the things that I do is I like to have relationships with the college ministers just to know their programming, to have an understanding of what they do and what night they meet. And that way we're able to tell students. I had a student last night that said, hey, what are some churches that you would recommend in this area? And I was able to list them by name and then say, hey, this college minister focuses on this study on this night of the week. And really trying to get them plugged back into the local church. And so that's really our heart And it's unfortunate that at times Young Life and some of these others that you've listed that were kind of viewed as the enemy or that were in competition with one another. But I know our heart is to grow them in a relationship with Christ, but also His church, and we
Sure.
want them to be serving and plugged in and discipled in a local church.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, I mean, ultimately, y'all partnering with the church, y'all have opportunities to step in where realistically the church doesn't have much avenues. The more and more that we progress, where churches are not being allowed into public schools and where churches are not being allowed onto college universities and all stuff like that, y'all still have an access point. And so, in all reality, what the church needs to do is the church needs to see that y'all might be an access point that we are losing contact with, and we need to get behind and support you guys in the ways that we can. And so I guess that would be my next question from a junior high, high school, or college, or just across the spectrum FCA standpoint. How can a church come behind what y'all do, and how can the church support FCA?
Absolutely. I think a few of the ways, obviously, being a part of our events. We have a great networking with youth pastors for our Fields of Faith event. We reach out to you guys to let you know, sometimes later than we should, but let you know what date that's going to be on. Hopefully, to bring your youth ministries out to the event, to partner with us in that regard. We do a tailgate at ours, and so it's kind of fun to see the churches show up before and cook things, or just come and have a meeting place before it starts. But then we're also, looking to you guys for people in the church that you trust, to come in and be an encourager, to lead students in that next step, whether they're making a first time decision for Christ or whether they just need somebody to pray with them. But we're kind of partnering with you guys and looking to you guys to help provide some of those volunteers that we might need to put on an event like that. And so that's a big area of need, is just to have the backing of local churches to come in and support and be bodies in this ministry alongside of us. Then other ways, church partnerships that work really well is FCA is a faith supported organization. And so, just like missionaries, we're out fundraising our support and our budgets, and those things. And a lot of people don't realize that FCA is a faith supported organization. But I personally have to go out and fundraise for not only my salary and benefits package, but I also have to go out and Bibles, Gatorades, meals, food, gas, all of those things that go into a ministry budget. We're fundraising for those. And so church partnerships are huge, and supporting our local FCA as a whole, but also individuals that churches have a heart for, whether that's youth sports, whether that's junior high and high school huddles, whether that's college ministry, whatever the case may be. Having church back us financially is a huge opportunity for partnership as well. But yeah, looking for youth pastors or even volunteers within your church that would say, I want to be a character coach. I want to come alongside FCA and just be a volunteer, whether that's 7-on-7 football, whether that's going to the huddle if the school allows them to be on campus, stepping in at some of these events, volunteering. There's a place for everybody for sure, as part of the local body.
Yeah, no, and I definitely have seen it. I have been a part of different groups and organizations. I would say another thing that I don't know if it's necessarily been addressed here. Another thing that FCA does really, really well, at least I might be biased because I went and did part of it, is FCA also emphasizes a lot of direction and focus on building leaders, and doing a lot of discipleship in the leadership direction. And so allowing your kids and encouraging your kids to be a part of FCA huddles and everything else, FCA has a lot of great opportunities for you to get plugged in, or for your students to get plugged in as leaders. As most of all of the huddles or the FCA groups, they all have presidents and vice presidents, and just like any school organization would have. But when I was in high school, I always say that I was an unathletic athletic student. But it was one of those things that FCA didn't care. It was something that I could go be a part of on Wednesdays after we did our youth activities. We just met really, really late on Wednesday nights. And for my last 2 years of high school, I went from being FCA vice president to FCA president. And the summer that I went for, or the summer that before I was going to be vice president, our FCA huddle leader was just like, hey, there's this leadership camp that FCA takes kids to. We really, really want you to go. And I got to I got to drive to Abilene because I didn't live in Abilene at the time. Got to drive to Abilene, and the president of the Big Country FCA was part of it. He personally drove me to College Station, which is like a 5.5, 6 hour drive. And it might be a little shorter than that, but a pretty long drive because we are in Texas and it takes forever to drive anywhere. And it was just one of those things you could tell from the bottom of the organization to the top of the organization that they invest in students and they invest in their desire and their purpose of making student leaders, which is really, really cool. And so I guess I have two other questions to kind of go in this mindset. First off, for the youth pastor that does have a FCA program, but they're just not involved, or they don't really promote it because they don't really know about it, and this is really the first time that they've been hearing information, how would you recommend that someone that does have an FCA in their area get involved? Both from the youth pastor perspective and the student perspective.
Absolutely. I think from the student pastor perspective is just approaching the school or the area director and just asking, is there a FCA presence or an FCA huddle on this or that campus, or just finding out where are the FCA huddles in this area. And you may discover through that there's not one at a particular junior high or a particular high school that you want it at, and it may be as simple as that to get the conversation started. We are, with, like I mentioned earlier, some are over 10 schools, some are over 70, and so sometimes, unfortunately, schools get overlooked just because there's not already a presence there, or even after COVID. There were certain guidelines and restrictions that we weren't allowed to be on campuses, and so some of those schools are just now getting start back up with kind of a frequent huddle because they weren't allowed to have it for a couple of years. And so I would reach out to the local director. If you don't know, find somebody. You can go on our Texas FCA page. You can find the different staff in the different areas. We have multi-area directors that cover 5 different regions of this state. And so they're overseeing the entire area, while then you have your more localized directors. And so maybe there's not a director in your direct area, but there is somebody over that region that can help point you in the right direction of who's staffing that area. And then if somebody's not staffing that area, we're always wanting, opportunities to either have part-time ambassadors. We have several youth pastors that come on as ambassadors, which is our part-time position, usually about 10 to 15 hours a week. It's a great bivocational opportunity. But we look for them to do that, or even like as I did, I was just a volunteer that said, hey, I want to be a character coach. I want to have more exposure to students on their campuses. And so I became a character coach, went through the FCA local person there. And really what that did for him is it allowed him to trust me to know that it's running on a week-to-week basis, and he would check in and he would come anytime that he could. But really, it was kind of self-sufficient in a way because of a local youth pastor stepping up and say, hey, I want to be a character coach. So that's one way there. Yeah. Same thing for students. Students reaching out to their local youth pastor and saying, hey, is there FCA? The youth pastor doesn't know. Maybe he or she can then say, let me look into that for you. Going to different FCA sites, our Texas FCA being one of them, seeing what region. We have Big Country FCA here in the Abilene, which kind of covers the Concho Valley, Stephenville, Brownwood. Then you have your Permian Basin, which is the Midland, Odessa area. You have El Paso, you have Panhandle. And so they all kind of have their own home base and their websites that they provide. And so you can go first to Texas FCA and then find the region that you live in here in West Texas or in the metro or different areas throughout Texas. So,
Sure. And if you don't live in Texas, I would assume that there are websites for most states, or there's a national FCA website that you can look into.
yes. Yeah, our national FCA site is fca.org. And then you usually can find where you need to go from there to get into your particular region, whatever state you may be in.
Okay. Awesome. And then I guess the other question that I'd be asking is, what if you don't have an FCA in your area? How and what would be the steps to get started? Obviously, like you said, you want to get out, and you want to speak to the closest representative within that area. But what is the groundwork of, I guess, getting that started, or would you want to maybe go to the school first, or like just talk to teachers and coaches first to see if there's interest in someone leading it? Or, as you said, you're the youth pastor, you can also lead it if the school allows it. Where's the first couple steps where, if you don't have one, how you get one started?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest piece is it really helps to find somebody that's on campus that will be the huddle coach, as we call them, person of peace, somebody that will be like, yeah, I'll run, I'll help get it started, and that comes from the promotional side of it to when are we going to meet, those types of things. And so I know this year for a particular school district, we actually had like a leadership rally. And so they were able to come in as an entire district, junior high and high schools, and they had a new huddle coach. And so they were able to kind of meet with them before and prepare them for that night. But then they got to sit in with their kind of student team that they had assembled just via kids that were interested in being part of FCA. To then plan the huddles and what that looks like. And so they were picking a week, they were picking a day, they were picking a time that they could meet. And really, it's just somebody that can kind of be a facilitator on behalf of FCA within the campus. That usually is the best avenue, just because you have somebody on campus. With FCA, we do certify huddles. And so that person would then be you. Basically, we would train and equip them what that looks like to be a huddle coach on their campus, and they would have to agree to our statement of faith and different things like that. Kind of our paperwork side of things. But then from there, it's tapping into a local rep to get ideas of how to do that. Talking to somebody else that may have an FCA. We use particular schools and how they model. Hey, they have a leadership team. Theirs is mostly student led. This is what their huddle looks like. And so sometimes we put them in contact with somebody else that's doing what they're doing. And how they got started, and just kind of using shared experience in order to kind of get the ball rolling and how they can get established on their own campus.
Gotta love the mute button. So great information, great opportunity just to be involved and stuff. And it is one of those things that whether doesn't really matter what parachurch organization you're a part of. The thing is just as youth pastors should be on the same team, and we've voiced that multiple times in this podcast already, or it's not a competition. We're not fighting for who has this student. It's how do we get all students. We have to understand that some of us are going to be more adept and more skilled at grabbing different sets of students. And so why not partner all together? And so with this, hopefully we can move into the realm where we can get a person from First Priority to come on, and a person from Young Life, and a different parachurch organizations to come on and talk about how we as a church can also support them, but also how to get involved with their programs as well. Obviously, in our neck of the woods, FCA is the parachurch organization. We have a Young Life here as well, but FCA is far and frequent in Texas schools. And it has definitely been a blessing and an opportunity to see a lot of students that most youth pastors wouldn't get to because of football practices on Wednesday nights, or they're too tired from everything else and they don't want to come on Sundays, to where they'll show up for a Bible study in a 7-on-7 game, or they'll show up and they'll do a early morning FCA huddle 45 minutes, an hour before school starts, because they're already up there normally, or something to that nature. And so ultimately it's just providing more and more opportunities for students to come and encounter Jesus. And the thing is we are all on the same page, we're all on the same team, and we have to do our part as working as a team to make that happen in the long run. So Ryan, as a person of FCA, as a friend, man, thank you for what you do. It is definitely a calling. It is definitely a task at some points. I've had conversations with you where good and bads have happened. And the thing is in all honesty, you kind of put more faith into your profession than even some churches do, because like you said, you have to fundraise your own budget and everything. And so you have to find people that believe in what you're doing, and you have to find people that are willing and able to back you. And that takes a lot of boldness and encouragement and faith on your own. And so we are grateful for FCA. Obviously, like I said, I have benefited personally from FCA. And it's just a great opportunity for maybe the students. This is one of the things that I've always said. I did play sports in high school, but when it comes to football and baseball, I can talk it, but I can't go out and share life as well in that regard as I can with others. Now, I have skill sets just like everybody else, but sometimes our skill sets aren't sports, and so it's okay to drag in other people that have different opportunities and different mindsets when it comes to that. And so it has been awesome. I love when my students are talking about being involved in their local FCAs at their campuses, and it helps out a ton. Last thing, and this is just a spitfire question. If you had any word of encouragement to youth pastors that are listening to this, what would it be from a fellow youth pastor, and then now from a FCA representative? What is your advice to youth pastors that are listening? And then we'll kind of close out the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that could get into a whole snowball effect of things. But as a youth pastor, I think it's important
good, man. We got 20, 30 minutes if it has to be.
There you go. No, I was going to say, I think one of the biggest things, and that's how you and I kind of got connected, is via a community of like-minded and like skilled youth pastors in the area. Coming from the Wichita Falls area, we had a healthy group, about 10 to 12 of us youth pastors in the area that got together, and really it was just a safe place to share the good, the bad, the ugly, but also a place to gain ideas and insights and open doors for partnerships. I know up there they still are doing a weekend called Unite, usually around Martin Luther King Day, out at Camp Chaparral. And so it was just kind of neat to see what came out of that. It started with about 4 of us meeting weekly, became to about 12, 16. It kind of grew as guys were kind of in and out and in that area. But that was something for me as a youth pastor that was sacred. Like I did not block. I did not plan anything during that block of time. I made sure to be there every week that I could, unless I was traveling. And so it was just healthy. It was healthy to have guys praying for you. And so find a community, even if it's just 2 or 3 youth pastors in your area, get together, chat about ministry, do life together, walk through the word together. Other thing is the family side of things. Your family is your first ministry. And so don't forsake them for your ministry. Set up healthy boundaries. That allows you to minister to your bride and to your kids as well. Invite them to come alongside. That's one of the things that's been neat to see is my daughter goes with me every single Friday to one of the local huddles, and then I take her to daycare afterwards. We want her to be raised up and seeing what her mom and I do via FCA and via being a school teacher and coach. And so do that as well. And then have a date night with your spouse is huge. And so I think for me, a big piece also, this is kind of going back to what you were saying a little bit ago about FCA having an opportunity to reach students that you wouldn't get on a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, or even going to a lunch at school is, a big piece of my life. I felt like when I surrendered to student ministry when I was 16, that I was a lifer. Like I didn't have any aspirations to be, a lead pastor somewhere of a church. I wanted to be a student minister and a student pastor. And so to be outside of the church walls for the last 4 years, I see an opportunity to reach students that I wasn't getting on Wednesday nights for one reason or another, whether they didn't want to, darken the doors of a church because of, church hurt or what have you, or they hear church and they're like, nah, I don't want any of that. But you can say, hey, come have pizza at FCA, and they're introduced to the gospel. That was huge. But then the other side of it for me, and it's kind of cool now being in college ministry and college FCA, because a lot of the students that I'm ministering to now, I was kind of butthurt that they were, they were traveling on weekends. They weren't able to be at church because they were doing travel ball, or they were having to miss Wednesday nights, like you mentioned earlier, because they have practice or they're making up games, or maybe they're part of large districts that they have to play games on Wednesday nights. And so now I'm able to meet them where they're at. And a lot of these college students haven't had simple experiences like youth camp. They haven't had experiences of a retreat or a D-Now weekend, or even just fun and silly games. Last night we played rock, paper, scissors, and the biggest fan, and you know how you kind of the rock, paper, scissors train. And it was fun just seeing 20-year-olds like laughing uncontrollably at playing rock, paper, scissors. But they're able to have some experiences via FCA that they didn't get when they were growing up in the local youth group, because they were chasing their dream of being a college athlete or a professional athlete, someday. And so it's been an eye opener for me, stepping outside of the walls and trusting the Lord to provide in the areas of fundraising and different things. I had an opportunity to join FCA like 10 years ago, and I said no because of the fundraising aspect of it. But it has been neat to see just the continued ministry, the continued relationship building within college athletics for me with FCA. And so, yeah.
That's good. That's real good. And I mean, it's almost like you've just been like listening into my last couple podcast episodes, man, because like those have been prevalent topics when it came to literally. This episode's gonna go out in a couple months, but I mean, today recording this is September 19th. Last week's episode was Family First Ministry, which you said verbatim. And then I literally recorded an episode yesterday talking about the danger of loneliness. And so like it is very, very prevalent information. But the thing is it needs to be heard over and over and over again, because you're either going to be one, if you're not accepting this already, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to say, "Oh, well, this can't be me. I'm not that person," and it's going to take you a long time to realize, "Oh, maybe it is me." Or you're just there, and it's really, really hard to get out of those situations sometime. And so, the more that you hear that these should be priorities and focuses, man, the more that we need to give it and send it out, because those are two of the most important things when it comes to ministry. And so I'm right on the same page with you. Great stuff, great advice, great input. And they are things that obviously they're evident when you live them out too. And so when you put your family first, when you prioritize community and networking, ultimately it always builds a good foundation for what you do, regardless of what ministry you're doing. And so very, very appreciative of that insight and wisdom. But Man, I think that's all the time we have for this show. And so if you're listening to this and you're a frequent listener of our podcast, all we ask is that you do your part to get our podcast out to the greater student ministry audience. Share our podcast with your youth pastor friends on social media, or tag us in a specific episode that really stood out to you. Whatever you do, please be sure to tag us on your post on your favorite student ministry platform by using @TalkStudentMin. And then finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the show in the future like Ryan, shoot us an email, podcast@studentministryconversations.org, or reach out to us on social media, and we'd love to set up a time for you to come on the show. But Ryan, this is a great topic, great opportunity for an extension of ministry. And I like how you said that in this, is you're not... parachurch almost gets a bad rap sometimes because you're not necessarily a other church ministry. You're an extension of church ministry. And so you are just an arm that just allows a greater reach for the expansion and grabbing any and all students' attention for the sake of the gospel. But such a great topic. We are excited for listeners to hear this one. And if you're listening to us, we hope that you have a great week, and we will see you next time.